Tonight on KGW News, farm workers in Oregon continue their fight for overtime pay. An update on the bill aimed at making that happen. Plus, the CDC is changing its indoor mask guidelines when Washington and Oregon are expected to do the same. And later, some Good Samaritans helped stop a carjacker who took off in a car with a little boy still in the backseat.
In hindsight, looking back, I'm like, man, that could have got out of control. That could have been crazy.
We talked to one of them who sprung into action to help. Your news starts now. We start tonight with breaking news where Portland police have been called out to reports of shots fired in southeast Portland. This is on Southeast 119th Street and Stark. More than a dozen police units are on the scene right now. We are working to find out if anyone's been arrested or hurt and update you when more information becomes available. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Friday night. Just several days into Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russian troops expanded their attack on the capital city of Kyiv. Today, the explosions and gunfire could be heard across the region. The invasion is fueling fears of a wider war in Europe. As Ukraine's president says, at least 137 people have been killed and hundreds more injured. President Biden is imposing harsh new sanctions against Russia, including cutting off Russia's largest banks and companies from Western financial markets and restricting exports.
The sanctions we've imposed exceed SWIFT. The sanctions we imposed exceed anything that's ever been done. They are profound sanctions. Let's have a conversation in another month or so to see if they're working.
The United Nations also announced today it's preparing for millions to flee Ukraine, with the majority of refugees heading to nearby Poland and Moldova. We'll continue to follow developments in Ukraine. You'll find updates on air and online at kgw.com. Next week, lawmakers in Salem are set to vote on the farm workers' overtime bill. The legislation passed out of a special committee last night. Our Alma McCarty shares the update on how those for and against are reacting.
Thursday night in Salem, as lawmakers continued to debate House Bill 4002 in a special committee.
That was our bat signal.
Organizers with Paccoon and Oregon Farm Workers Union rallied outside in support of the farm worker overtime bill.
Just a really beautiful image on our state capitol with the gold figure on top.
Reina Lopez, Paccoon's president and executive director, helped bring the idea for this legislation to lawmakers a couple years back.
It would basically create a 5-year phase-in of farm worker overtime, eventually getting to 40 hours of overtime compensation by the 5th year. It also includes a tax credit that small and mid-sized growers could use too to help them through the transition.
She says it's a matter of equity, dignity, and respect for the 87,000 farm workers in Oregon.
We're not going to be able to expand the labor force and improve the conditions if we don't do something about changing this culture.
Representative Andrea Salinas, a chief sponsor of the bill, says it rights the wrongs of a federal labor law, which excluded farm workers from overtime pay.
I don't blame anybody today for setting that system up, but I do take responsibility for changing a system that was rooted in racism.
Representative Salinas says while she understands the costs are going up for farmers across the board, it's time to prioritize the worker.
I'd love to put the worker first this time and then figure out all of those other inputs and costs that either make or break an operation.
Jeff Stone, executive director of the Oregon Association of Nurseries, says he agrees employers should pay farm workers fairly. But this amended bill isn't the way. He sides with many farm owners across the state who feel that this bill doesn't consider the unique challenges of the agriculture industry and will negatively impact family farms and even the farm workers.
We need to protect the family farm and make sure that it's successful. And we also need to protect the farm worker and make sure that they are adequately paid. We don't think that that's a stretch, but unfortunately, that's not what's before us today.
House Bill 4002 passed out of the Joint Committee on Farm Worker Overtime, members of the committee voting along party lines with Democrats in support and Republicans against. It now heads to the House floor for a vote.
Thank you, Alma. Now let's get you caught up on tonight's other headlines. The CDC announced it is relaxing mask guidelines. It will now only recommend indoor mask wearing in places with high levels of COVID infections. The CDC says more than half of U.S. counties are at low or medium risk right now. Oregon and Washington both plan to lift their indoor mask mandates in mid-March. All three Portland area counties are considered medium risk at the moment. Do you recognize this woman? Tiger police said she pulled out a gun and robbed a coffee stand Friday afternoon on Southwest Walnut Street and Pacific Highway. As you can see from this video, she has pink hair, a tattoo along her neck, and she took off with a man in a light green Kia Soul. If you have any information on the robber, call Tiger Police. And we have some good news for an Arizona couple moving to Portland whose stuff was stolen by thieves. As we reported last night here at 11, Jennifer Belts and her partner Jeff were moving from Flagstaff to Oregon when someone took their U-Haul from outside a motel in the Troutdale area. Multnomah County deputies say they've made an arrest. They found the missing U-Haul last night and recovered a lot of the couple's belongings. Deputies also say they found other stolen items and a handgun in the suspect's car. And now to a heart-stopping rescue in Northeast Portland. Police say a thief stole a car with a 3-year-old inside. That led to a chase, a crash, and several acts of bravery by strangers. Catherine Cook has the story.
Police say the child was not hurt. The suspect has some non-life-threatening injuries. He's in the hospital in police custody. The Good Samaritan who made sure of that is incredibly thankful.
We could be looking for a missing child right now.
Instead, T.P. Brown Jr. is talking about answered prayers.
My prayer this morning was for God to show up for me and put me in an impactful position to help other people, but not knowing the impact that he was going to put me in today.
T.P. was driving to work Friday morning when he saw a Prius speed by him, horn honking, chasing down another car. The driver of that Prius was a father. Police say he was chasing after a man who'd just stolen his wife's running car from their driveway with the couple's 3-year-old son inside. It happened near Northeast 16th and Shaver. About 2 miles away, the dad crashed his car into the stolen vehicle, stopping it. TP says the dad jumped into his wife's car and struggled with the driver.
The car reverses at a high rate of speed. Passenger door is still open, so it's clipping all the cars down the side of the road.
You can see the damage left behind. Neighbor Evie Henby's 1968 Cadillac among them.
Classic DeVille Cadillac, my warship, yeah, here. And it got smacked real good, and there was a lot of people in jeopardy here.
Eventually, the suspect ran off.
I looked back, and the guy was gone.
That's when TP swung into action. He drove off to find the guy and spotted him on Northeast 19th and Pacific, a dead end right next to I-84.
So I immediately floored it, pinned him against the fence, asked him, not to move until the police came here.
TP says that didn't stop the guy from trying to climb the fence, so he got out and held him. Then someone else showed up to help.
The Amazon driver, I wish I knew his name, got out of his truck with some rope, and we began to tie him up and detain him until the police got here.
Moments later, officers took the suspect into custody.
Every single cop that I talked to today was a handshake.
And that was TP's day. One he knows could have gone much differently.
In hindsight, looking back, I'm like, man, that could have got out of control. That could have been crazy. But I was just doing what I was called to do in that moment at that time.
Tomorrow is another day. And for TP,
God is real.
Another reason to pray.
Prayers up, blessings come down.
In Northeast Portland, Catherine Cook, KGW News.